These 5 books are dark. I consider myself somewhat of an optimist, but that doesn't mean I can't appreciate a well-executed, soul-crushing sci-fi book. So here are 5 books that will make you question everything, starting with Blindsight by Peter Watts. 2 months since the stars fell, 2 months of silence while the world held its breath. A space probe hears a whisper from the edge of the solar system. Whatever's out there isn't talking to us, it's talking to a distant star, or perhaps to something closer, something en route. Blindsight is a hard sci-fi first contact story about consciousness. It compares the differences between intelligence and consciousness and asks whether consciousness is even a good thing. This book totally reframed the way I think about these topics, and it's something that I've been thinking about and reading about ever since I finished it. These kind of thought-provoking sci-fi concepts are exactly why I love science fiction. But these are not concepts that left me full of hope and optimism. They are concepts that left me thinking, oh dear. Oh no. So how did it do that? Well, we have a character that was separated from their emotions by a brain surgery. We have a character that can control the minds of robots. And we have a character that has 4 distinct personalities within the one mind, as well as an AI spaceship and a vampire. I don't think that individually any of the characters are that likable or even that interesting, but each of the characters' different levels of intelligence as well as forms of consciousness all tie into the thematic journey of the book. The way they each affect personality, relationships, and evolution of the human species, usually in a detrimental way, was fascinating if not depressing. I don't know if Peter Watts has a lot of love for humans, but it's clear he loves science fiction. As a marine biologist, he includes a lot of actual science in the book, and there's also a lot of literary influences. The story and setting feel a little bit like A Rendezvous with Rama, but the writing style reminded me more of Neuromancer. He also sprinkles in a little bit of Hyperion-esque horror, as well as some roadside picnic type surrealness. This book won't appeal to everyone, as Watts doesn't hold your hand with the world building. It took me around 100 pages to get into, and even then, Watts only drip feeds you pieces of the puzzle. But if you don't mind a jarring initial reading experience, as well as some nihilistic themes, I think Blindsight is a book you may enjoy reading and rereading again and again. Moving on to our second book, we have Dying Inside by Robert Silverberg. David Selig was born with an awesome power. The ability to look deep into the human heart, to probe the darkest truths hidden in the secret recesses of the soul. With reckless abandon, he used his talent in the pursuit of pleasure. Then one day, his power began to die. We move now from a book that was on the harder end of the sci-fi spectrum to one that is on the softer end. Telepathic abilities is pretty much the extent of the sci-fi elements in Dying Inside. It reads a lot more like literary fiction in a similar way to Flowers for Algernon. The difference between the two is that Charlie in Flowers for Algernon is a rather empathetic character, whereas David in Dying Inside... David is a neurotic, insecure man that has squandered a powerful ability. His lack of ambition, his fear of being caught, and his own selfishness have resulted in him using this ability for little more than pursuing women. David spends a disproportionate amount of time thinking about sex, and while these aren't particularly enjoyable scenes to read, it does make sense that this lonely, insecure character that has the ability to form mental connections craves physical connections as well. The book showcases an interesting side of telepathy. One would like to think that you could use it for something noble, like solving crimes, but telepathy is inherently invasive, and that can be alienating. The ability is both a blessing and a curse. As the proverb goes, he who peeps through a hole may see what will vex him. While the book is literally about telepathy, it's also about any gifts or opportunities that we squander through our actions or lack thereof. Talents wasted and relationships lost. David never fully utilizes his ability, and he doesn't handle losing it very well either. David himself isn't very relatable, but the experience of aging, the loss of time, and the loss of self are all universal. The writing in this book highlights the human language at its best and at its worst. The prose is poetic. I think that Silverberg is one of the great sci-fi writers. But there are also some dated language and attitudes. My interpretation was that Silverberg was depicting a flawed character, but it can make for some uncomfortable reading. Ultimately, life is hard and entropy comes for us all. I just hope to do a better job of making the most of it. Alright, up next we have 1984 by George Orwell. Winston Smith works for the Ministry of Truth and secretly dreams of rebellion, a dream that leads him to the shadowy resistance group, the Brotherhood. 1984 is a dystopian classic, and part of the reason I think it has stood the test of time is because of the riveting narrative. The tensions are high because the dystopian future of 1984 is a very scary place to live. Saying the wrong thing or even thinking the wrong thoughts can have dire consequences. The stakes are high for every character decision. Orwell explores themes including surveillance and propaganda in extreme ways through things such as Big Brother and Doublethink. But the fact that these were inspired by real events and the messages have remained relevant throughout history makes them all the more scary. There were several characters that I was invested in throughout the novel, but it felt like every time one started to give me a little bit of hope, they would let me down. Just like a totalitarian government breaking down its citizens, this book broke me down piece by piece, until by the time I had nothing left to defend myself with, the ending delivered a knockout blow. This is simultaneously one of the most masterfully written and emotionally devastating books I have ever read. Okay, for our fourth book we have Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood. Snowman, known as Jimmy before mankind was overwhelmed by a plague, is struggling to survive in a world where he may be the last human. He embarks on a journey through the wilderness that was formerly a great city, until powerful corporations took mankind on an uncontrolled genetic engineering ride. When I was at university, I was writing a dystopian story, and a professor recommended I read this book for inspiration. But the story I was writing was a comedy, and Oryx and Crake is upsetting. Good book, bad recommendation. So why was this book disturbing? Well, one of the reasons was the hubris with which we pursue scientific and technological advancements. This book includes some weird and wonderful developments, including gene splicing, hybrid animals, and cure-all pharmaceuticals. And it's an interesting question whether these are negatively influencing society, or they're just reflecting what we already are. And Oryx and Crake isn't a particularly flattering reflection of humans. It examines the way we lie to ourselves, the way we fight for power over others, and the types of entertainment that we create and consume that nobody should ever have to experience. Margaret Atwood is an excellent writer, and her beautiful descriptions serve as a contrast and a way in which to shine a light on the darkness in this dystopian world. If you're looking for a fun book with some characters to root for, this is not the book for you. But if you're looking for a challenging book where you don't mind having to wade through some ickiness in order to reap the reward of those challenges, then you might want to try Oryx and Crake. And just before we get to our final book, if you need group therapy after reading any of these books, then come chat about sci-fi with us on Discord. And if you're interested in joining video hangouts or voting on my TBR, then check out the link to my Patreon, where you can become one of my robots, androids, or cyborgs like Nima and the New Eden. And finally, we have the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy by Cixin Liu. Set against the backdrop of the Chinese Cultural Revolution, strange things start happening to prominent scientists. And this could be linked to a mysterious mission that is sending messages out into space. The Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy is packed full of sci-fi concepts, many of which melted my mind and made my brain bleed, none of which made me overly optimistic for the future of humanity. This is a hard sci-fi First Contact series that changed the way I think about aliens. If you're interested in things like the Fermi paradox or the Dark Forest theory, I think you'll find this series both fascinating and horrifying. The book highlights humanity's ingenuity and resilience, while also pointing out our distrust in others and our own ruthlessness. It's a fascinating push and pull between a fight for survival and the question of whether we even deserve to exist at all. The scope of the story deals with space and time in a way that can make you feel utterly insignificant and powerless. And by altering our understanding of physics and dimensions, it changes what might be possible and, unfortunately, what might be probable. I liked the first book, The Three-Body Problem, but the ideas just get bigger and wilder in The Dark Forest and Death's End. Both the characters and the writing can feel stiff at times, but I think for the ideas alone in this series, it is a monumental achievement in science fiction. that is both equal parts sense of wonder and cosmic horror. So those are 5 Bleak sci-fi books. Let me know your thoughts on these and what other Bleak sci-fi I should pick up, and then probably read an Andy Weir book afterwards in order to cheer myself up. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, subscribe. It's free, and you can find more sci-fi content over here.